I'm Evan Lionel, and welcome to tonight's edition of MER, Men Equal Rights. But this just doesn't stand for men equal rights. It stands for the rights of parents who want 50-50 custody with their children. That is our desire, 50-50 custody now. That's the basis of this show. Today, we'll be talking about things like parental alienation, the second half. We'll be talking about children who have been separated from their parents unlawfully, and we'll hear the stories of fathers who have been kept away from their children and stopped from seeing their children unlawfully and unjustly. We have a special guest on tonight's show, which I'm very happy to introduce to you. But before we do that, last week we had some problems, some technical difficulties, because this is our second show. So please forgive us and know that this show is not based on anything that is for performance purposes or purposes of entertainment. This is a show to inform you of how to navigate yourself through the court system and inform you of how to know the law so that you never hear these words. Ignorance is no excuse. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. So with that said, welcome to MER, Men Equal Rights. Before we even bring on our special guest, I want to bring on one of the panelists who spoke last week, but his sound was not up, so we couldn't hear him. We want to hear his story this week. So please welcome to the platform, Douglas.
Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for having me, everyone. Sorry you couldn't hear me or see me last week. I'm also the technical director of the show. And, I didn't realize that I couldn't actually speak on the same system that's streaming the show. So we got that out of the way and we're here now. What I was sharing with you guys last week that no one heard is my actual story. Just like these other men here, I'm a father that's dealing with this craziness. And I was with my lady we were together for about a total of 15 years. We were married for 9. We were living in California where it all came to a pass, but there was this June afternoon and we got in an argument that morning about, some financial whatever. I had to go travel farther than she had to travel for work. And we were both dealing with issues with our cars, right? So we're kind of like getting this argument about who takes which car farther and which is a safer car to take, right? I was trying to take the safer car farther because I have to travel farther, kind of makes sense, whatever. So I'm off to do my job and I go to check on her later in the day. And she tells me that she's gone and, just to go home. And there's a note at the house. So, I'm about an hour and a half away from my house. And once I finally get home, I walk inside and it looks like it's kind of been ransacked because she'd grabbed a bunch of stuff. And there's a note saying that she took the kids back to Washington, right? So, the next week is the worst week of my life. And I'm trying to figure out how to go about pursuing the rest of my life. Do I go back to Washington State, where I'm from, or do I stay in California and try to continue to pursue my dreams of being a filmmaker, right? And me not having a good relationship with my own father, that's exactly what I did. I ran back home so I could try to save my marriage and be closer to my children, right? But when I got back to the state of Washington and I got to see my kids, before I could see my kids, I was handed, served the paperwork. And then I put my kids to bed that evening. And what I read on this document is that I'm this horrible monster that has been just obliterating her self-esteem for the last 15 years. And, I've destroyed her entire life long before we got married, but yet she got married to me and had children with me. And, things like sexual assault and domestic abuse, when I've never had a record in my life. I never had the police called on me for anything. So it's like, where did all this stuff come from? I even called her up like, yo, like sexual assault, what are you talking about, right? And she's like, oh, well, that's just what the attorney said. So I just follow what the attorney said. Oh, Okay. So, this was in 2017. And then the next year and a half go by, and we finally get to divorce. And, I had actually had an attorney, and I'd actually got the attorney for the actual divorce trial, right? But that didn't wind up taking place because, you get the little retainer, and the retainer got burnt out before we actually got to the trial of all these little minuscule things about her just eating my time up. There'd be times where I have to travel for work, and I try to have my children, or I try to have my sister come pick up my children because it's still my time, and if they can't spend the time with me, they might as well spend it with my side of their family so that they can see their other family members, right? I'm over here getting in arguments with my attorney and with her in airports trying to get this all situated, right? And then trying to go do my job. Um, you know, I went through 3 attorneys, and over the course of all of it, I realized that we have to learn how to do this ourselves because they don't want to give us the equality, and they want to try to paint us out to be bad. Like my attorney at first, he told me that, he was all about fighting for fathers, but as soon as the money was out, he was gone, right? And then when we go to the actual divorce trial, um, the judge that we were supposed to have, he had another thing that he was doing with some real estate issue, and that wound up going longer. So they just like tossed our case over to another judge on the day of my trial, right? Speaking with Evan about this earlier, he shared some information with me that I wish I had known, because I would have been able to throw the whole case out and we could start from scratch. But where I'm at now is I've been able to kind of like parlay a situation that the courts are no longer involved. Over the course of the summer, I had an attorney that was supposed to be on my defense, and this actually took place that we had a clear contempt matter over, and he didn't want to file the contempt, so I wound up firing him and doing the contempt myself. And then I got the contempt to happen, and then another couple months go by, and in September I was able to convince her counsel to get her and I into co-parent counseling, and then get my children into counseling sessions. And then these 2 counselors would talk back and forth to one another to ultimately get us to 50-50. And that's where I'm at now. And, just recently I'd seen the docket, and it's nice to not see this dude's name on the docket. Like there's literally no attorney there sitting there anymore. So it's just her and I outside of the court system trying to get these counselors to get us to 50-50 now.
Well, John, thank you for sharing that. I mean, Douglas, thank you for sharing that with us. First of all, let me say my heart goes out to you. This is a difficult situation. You mentioned jurisdiction, and that's what a lot of people have no knowledge of. Every court has a jurisdiction that they actually preside over. Okay.
Yeah.
And if your area is out of the jurisdiction of the court, they have no business hearing your case. But once again, as I stated earlier, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So they'll take your case if you don't mention that this courthouse is out of my jurisdiction. I don't live here. Also, where were the kids born, Douglas?
They were born in Washington State. And you know what? The way that it played out is I'm from Washington State. We moved down to California to try to make our dreams come true, right? And then things didn't work out. Had I known the jurisdiction thing, I would have let her know that I'm staying in California, and I'm actually going to call the police right now because technically you've kidnapped our children. You need to bring them back to their home in the state of California, right? But I came back up to Washington State and spent 6 months trying to save my marriage. In the long run, that was my mistake for me trying to get what's best for my children. You know what I'm saying? Because had I had stayed in California, she would have had to come back down there, and the issue would have been jurisdiction in California. I stayed up here long enough in Washington State before we actually made it to trial that eliminated it being a jurisdictional issue. And like, that's the first thing dude brought up when we got into trial. It's like, yo, hold on, before you guys even talk about anything, how long you live here, bro? How long they live here? Okay, we can continue.
That's because he knows that jurisdiction would have affected him hearing the case. And she tricked you, Douglas. Are you
I got
aware?
gamed up, man. I got gamed up left and right. I thought I felt good because I look, this is my one win, Evan. This is what happened. So her attorney tried to bring in the witnesses at the very last minute, long past the deadline, right? This is the one win that I got. She tried to bring the witnesses up. I'm like, yo, I object. They was long past the deadline. He was like, yep, okay. I'm like, I got one. Okay, it's not gonna be so bad. And then for the next 2 days, I got my ass handed to me. So
she tricked you, and that's a common game used in family court and in family law that lawyers tell mostly females, because men, we're not thinking about game, and we're actually, a lot of us are thinking about the well-being of our children. That's what we're
exactly.
The moment they find out your heart, which is your children, then they're going to use those strings and pull on them. That's why your children are used as pawns. So the objective was to get you to stay there long enough so that within the law, they were proper within the law, so that
and also bleed my retainer dry, so that when we actually get to trial, they know I ain't got no money to keep fighting this shit.
And how much was your first retainer?
$3,000.
Mine was $10,000. So that's another thing, to exhaust your retainer. So did the attorney say, your retainer has been exhausted?
Listen, the day before trial, he's like, yo, like, I need some more bread, man. Like, we're out. You're spent. Like, you can give me some more money, or I could walk. I'm like, word? What happened to that whole, like, you're supposed to be down for the fathers, and like, can we figure the money out later? Like, can you just help me, dude? No.
That's the game. That's the
Dude
game.
bounced on me.
I'm from England. I'm down with the pound.
That's the game.
He was like, hey, it's deuce.
John, hold on a minute. That's the game. And the other game is when you're, as far as the jurisdiction thing goes, it is against the law for someone to take the children out of the state. And a lot of men lose their children just because a woman says, I'm leaving and I'm going back to Atlanta to be with my family. That's illegal, guys.
Right? That is illegal.
If you don't protest it and take it to court, then you have no recourse. But actually, you can go to the police. This goes out to everybody listening. If your children are taken out of the state in which they resided and have a life in that particular state, and they've been there for a long duration, then it's against the law. It's considered kidnapping, flat out kidnapping. And you're supposed to go to the police and tell them to bring your children back. But a lot of men think, oh, she is her baby too, she could take them. That's incorrect. Neither parent can take the children out of that jurisdiction of the court, or the jurisdiction of where they were born, or the jurisdiction of where they resided for a long period of time.
And it's probably localized to the length of time for the actual residence. But in the state of California, when we were there, I think it was 9 months was the considered residence. So that might differ by state.
Wow.
That could differ by state.
Before he starts talking, let me introduce John Rockmore, another one of our panelists. Go ahead, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was known from last week. Anyway, it is against the law for either parent to take the child out of state away from the other parent, no matter what. Doesn't matter how long you lived there. This is your child too. Men, you have rights. She cannot decide, I'm going to live with my mama in Alabama and take the kids. Nor can you. Trust me. Test the theory and see. They will come and they will arrest you for sure. But no, you have to get the permission. And especially if you have anything that's court ordered before they leave, they have to check in. It is a violation. It is against the law.
So the recourse is to go to the police. If your child has been taken out of state, you go to the police and file a police report. And it is their job to pursue it, go to that state, get your child, and bring your child back. And if the parent that's holding the child refuses to release the child, then that parent gets arrested. Many of you see the Amber Alert come on when you're driving, or you hear it on your phone where it's a loud beep and it says Amber Alert. Those are cases that parents have gone to the police and did the proper thing. So please be aware that's the proper thing to do. No one has the right, as John stated, to take your child out of the state. It's against the law. Go ahead, John.
And if you understand that they are going to leave, know that you have to go to the court right now. It's way easier to do this before they leave. If you know that she has that plan, go to the courts right away. It's easier if the child is still here to stop them from leaving, as opposed to going there to get them to come back. Because as we know, the system is not made for men. I'm sorry, we do not bash women, because everyone is, we look at 50-50 and everyone is the same. However, if she takes the child, you do have an uphill battle for sure.
Absolutely.
And so what he's talking about is what that's called is an ex parte hearing. Everyone has that constitutional right to an ex parte hearing, and you can file it in pro per. That simply means that you are not an attorney. You're filing on your own accordances, and you're filing for yourself. There's a self-help office that will help you file an ex parte hearing. That's called an immediate hearing. So what happens is the judge receives the ex parte filing. You have to get to court very early before court even opens, wait in line. And the moment you get there, you go into the clerk's office, you say, I have an ex parte hearing. That's because somebody's about to kidnap your child and you have knowledge of it. What happens is the clerk office, they take it, they send it up to the judge immediately to the judge's chambers. The judge has to accept the ex parte hearing. Once they see it, it's an emergency hearing, and your case is one of the first, if not the first case that is heard on the docket that day. Douglas, is there anything else you want to add before we bring on our next guest?
No, I mean, we're going to get into some subject matters that, I'll have some things to share.
Okay. So next, I'd like to introduce a gentleman who is known all over Hollywood and known to the world as America's vocal coach. But not only is he a vocal coach, he is the number one vocal coach from the show The Voice, also the show P. Diddy's Star Maker and Making of the Band. But those are just some of his small accolades in Hollywood. He's also a singer, songwriter, musician, and music producer that has worked with the likes of pretty much everyone in the business. He's the only artist that I know that has toured with Janet Jackson as well as Michael Jackson. I don't know anyone else who has done that. But more than anything, he is a father's rights activist. And throughout my search and my uphill battle to see and find my children, he has been by my side on many occasions. He's even come to court on quite a few occasions and witnessed the corruption firsthand in my case. But I didn't know in all the years that I've known him that he had gone through this way before myself and many others had gone through it. He went through it back in the 90s when this was a taboo subject to even talk about. I'd like to bring to the platform, the Murr Forum, Romeo Johnson. Please welcome Romeo, guys.
Thank you, Evan. How you guys doing tonight?
Good, Romeo. It's good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Ev. It's been a minute. We're not used to going too long without hanging.
Yeah, that's right. I see you in the studio over there. You're working, huh?
Yeah, this is my spot, right?
Well, thank you for taking the time, man.
Okay.
And I know your story, but can you tell everyone that's tuning in, because they need to know that this could happen to anybody. It's happened to Chris Rock. It's happened to Tyrese. We didn't even know it happened to you before all of us. Tell us what happened, Romeo.
Right. I was, well, my story's a little interesting, but because I was married for 13 years. I dated my wife 2 years before we got married. One thing that I want to state that I'm proud of, and I think makes a difference in how I dealt with things, was the fact that I'm the youngest of four, and our parents were together for 62 years. They dated for 2 years and they were married for 60. In my entire life, I never saw my dad put his hands on my mom. You know, I would see them argue, and at the most heated of their arguments, they would use little curse words and didn't even come out right. We'd make fun of them because they didn't even know how to curse right. But I didn't come from that. So the way that this all ended up was just really ridiculous. I was married for 2 years, dated my ex-wife for 2 years, and then we were married for 2 years. Anyone who knows me well knows that I was raised in a Christian home. The whole time that I dated my wife, you know, she knew that I was Christian. I knew that I shared everything with her. They were the nicest family. She was the youngest as well. Just really sweet to everybody, really kind, her and her sister and her brothers. And we got married after 2 years because, you know, we had all this in common, and I thought she was attractive. She thought I was attractive. We were popular. All the things that you young people think are the things that make you, you know, that's my soulmate. And, you know, right out of high school.
What year was this? Say
that again?
What year was this?
This had to be, when we first started to date, it had to have been around 1980. 1982.
I'm talking about when you were married, because that's when the state got involved once you signed that contract. What year was it?
Yeah, I got married in 1987.
Wow.
In 1987, right.
And what happened?
So what happened was, in 2 years into our marriage, she came to me one day out of the blue and told me she was interested in seeking another religion. Kind of caught me off guard. We never had issues with like fighting. That was never an issue with us ever. She was pretty calm. You know, I like to laugh. Just, you know, Evan, you know that. So we got along well. That wasn't an issue. But 2 years in, she let me know that she had, in her childhood, had some experiences with Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was like, wow, why would you never tell me that in 2 years of dating and 2 years of marriage? So I thought, well, that's interesting. I don't really know how to handle it. We were young. I was very young when we both were very young when we got married. So my idea of handling that was, wow, I don't know what to do. You know what? You know where I stand. If you want to look into it, go ahead. Not realizing that was going to separate us and start us to grow apart. And that was basically what it was. We just started to grow apart. We already had, my oldest son was already born. We would have good times, we would have bad times. The things that started to bother me and the marriage the most is that my career started to take off. The whole time that we dated in the first 2 years of our marriage, she was my biggest supporter. She was like my cheerleader, came to all my shows and, you know, gather her friends up. When she got involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses, she was like, I can't come to your shows anymore, and I don't want to be a part. Well, obviously, you know, as an artist and as a man, you want your wife to continue to be your best supporter. And that started to cause problems. We just kind of grew apart. Obviously, that hurt me. She felt like what she was doing was right. I felt like it wasn't. So we just grew apart. But we both loved our son. Eventually, obviously, we were getting along pretty well because we had another son. So right. I had a second son. And even though we were growing apart, we always did treat each other pretty much with respect through 11 more years. At one point, we had a talk, and I said, "Listen, it's clear that we're growing apart. Like you're really involved with this now. I get it. You ain't going nowhere. I'm not going to get involved with that. I'm a Christian. I'm where I am." And I said, "You know, we can't continue to fake this marriage. You know, we're kind of fake for the world." I said, "But I'm not going to leave my sons. So we got to figure out how we're going to have this. I'm not going to have my young sons grow up without me. I'm just not going to."
What state were you living in at the time?
California.
Okay, you were living in California.
Mm-hmm.
Married how many years?
At the time this conversation came about, probably 9 years.
Okay.
9 years, yeah. That's when that conversation first started. And I was like, listen, we gotta, at some point when they get old enough and I have a good enough relationship formed with them, then we can talk about making this an official divorce. And she was completely in line with it. We sat down and talked about it like normal adults. It was never crazy.
And let me interject, Romeo. That's something that's something very common. Separated but living in the home together for the sake of the children. I did that.
Yeah.
John, did you experience that?
Yes, sir, for sure.
Douglas, I imagine Douglas, did you experience that as well in your marriage?
Absolutely not. No, I came
Oh,
home
wow.
to a note, bro, and not everything ended like that.
Oh, okay. Well, it's in a lot of cases, there are two parents living in the home for the sake of the children, but they're actually separated. Did you file for legal separation, Romeo? Or were you two just agreed to be separated?
No, we didn't file for legal separation. We didn't even go as far as to think of a physical separation. We just knew emotionally we were going different directions, and that we wanted to have a one-on-one understanding that we both know that this is not happening. This is not going to continue. But we both love the boys, and we knew that, and she knew that I was not going to be out of their lives, because I had my father in my life my whole life, and that was important to me. So, and she received it well. She respected it, and we basically, like you said, we co-parented. We were like roommates, and we had schedules that kind of interacted. I would take care of the kids during the day while she was working, and she'd come home, and I would conveniently go to the gym, whatever I'm doing, and we tried to make it seamless in a way where the kids wouldn't detect that there was an issue.
I lived the same life, and the exact same life, and you know it. So when did things go bad, Romeo?
Right around, I think when the kids were about 8 or 9. I think it was 8 or 9. My youngest was 8 or 9, and the oldest one was like 13 or 14. And I said, we had developed such a tight relationship. Anyone who knows me knows my boys and I are super close. And I was like, you know what? We bonded. They know who I am. We have this relationship. At this point, I don't think we need to cheat each other out of each other's lives. I don't want to cut you out from something that could be good for you, and I don't want you to cheat me out of my life. And she was like, I agree. Like we literally shook hands on it. You know what I'm saying? Physically touched hands and shook hands on it. You good with that? I understand. All right. And then from that point, we probably went another year or so just kind of going through emotion, but that was understood. At one point, I do remember I went to her and I said, you know what? I'm wanting to take the boys to church with me, and that kind of brought a real stink. That put a twist to it. Still, it was never physical. It was always just, at the most, raising our voice a little bit. And so we got to the point where I said, man, it's time to do this. She said, okay. So I said, listen, I'm going to take my vehicle, my musical equipment, my personal things. I just bought a home from the Janet Jackson's tour. I said, you keep the house. You keep all the furniture. I'll take everything. That's my personal stuff. Do your thing. She said, really? Are you sure you don't want to sell the house and split it? I said, no. She said, I'm willing to do that. I said, no. I said, I actually want the kids to have as much the same. I wanted to stay normal for them as much as possible. It's going to be devastating enough to them that we're splitting. Let them stay in the same neighborhood, with their same friends, the same school. She said, wow, thank you.
So when did things go bad?
Okay, so I said, well, let's get a mediator. We gotta talk to a mediator. And they were like, we can do the paperwork. It just costs you a few $100s. You guys understand what you want to do. There's no fight. We did that. We got the person in line. And literally maybe 2 weeks later, man, I came home, and in all the years that I've known her, I'd never seen her behave the way that she did. She came home, I came home, she was fussing, yelling, cussing, getting in my face, jumping at me. I'm like, what are you doing? She's a petite little pretty girl. She was like, what, blah, blah, blah. You gonna get out my house? I was like, yeah, your house. Wait a minute, hold on. Just trying to trigger. And I'm like, what? I literally thought that she was like somebody, she was on something. I said, did you take something? Like, this is not you. I've never seen you behave this way. And she kept going and kept going. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're doing. Like, what are you? I'm like, bring your voice down. Nah. She kept going. And then it led to an escalated thing, and she screamed and she said, you hit me. Now my sons, one was in the bed, another son was in the hallway, and he was watching us. I could see him. She couldn't see him. And she said, you hit me. And I saw my son go, because he's watching me stand there talking, right? And I was like,
you had touched her. You weren't anywhere near her to hit her.
No, I was right there, but I didn't hit her, right? We were right there. We were talking. Like I told you, she was in my face and everything. So I said, what are you talking about? And she grabs the phone and she acts like she's calling. I'm thinking she's acting like she's calling. And she goes, can you come and help me? My husband is beating me up. And I'm like, whoa, girl, quit playing. It's early in the morning. I said, quit playing. That's not even funny. So I take the phone, I said, hang the phone up. Worst mistake there, right? Hang the phone up, right? I said, that's not funny. That's not even funny. And so she just looking at me like this. The phone rings right back. I'm like, whoa, did you really call? She answers the phone and she goes into, no, it's not a false alarm. Can you please hurry? And I'm like, wow. By this time she steps out, she sees my son. And my son's just looking like, oh my God, he loves both of us. He's freaking out. And she goes, what? He says, Mom, what? Why? And she starts screaming. I've never in my life seen her like this. I'm like, what is going on with her? She's screaming. She's screaming at him. She's screaming at me. I'm like, oh my God. So I look at him. I said, son, I'm out. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to sit here and wait for the cops to come. I'm going to go and try to square this away. So I leave. I contact an attorney. I told him what was happening. He was like, yeah, this is pretty common. This was around 1999 by the time this was happening. Wow. And I was like, wow, this is crazy, man. So we wait for several hours. He said, we're gonna have to just chill for some hours. We waited for hours, and he finally called me and said, okay, you have a warrant for your arrest. You have a restraining order on you. I'm like, for what? What are you talking about? So he says, here's the police report. He read the police report, and it said that I beat her up, threw her in the tub, roughed her up. I forgot the language they said. And I'm like, I'm like, dude, I didn't do any of that. He said, well, here's a good thing. The police officer did write on the police report, there's no physical evidence to support her accusations. I'm like, of course not. So he goes, well, we're going to have to contact them. We got to deal with this. So I had to go through all that process. I went about 3 weeks without being able to see my kids. And that was the worst 3 weeks of my life because they were calling me. And I hate this part, Evan, because I get emotional every time I talk about this. But they were calling me, and my attorney said, you can't answer the calls. Because if you answer them, even if you pick up the phone and say, hey, son, I'm not allowed to talk to you, then you violated the restraining order and you will be arrested. And I'm like, so what am I supposed to do? He said, you can't answer. I'm like, they're my kids. Like, now it'd be different if I just saw the phone ringing. But they were leaving messages. Daddy, where are you? We don't know if you're alive or not. Daddy, why won't you call me back? Daddy, what's going on? Daddy, I love you. And I'm like, dude, this is killing me, man. Like, can I call him back? He said, if they call you from a number that you don't recognize, the moment you hear their voice, you better hang up the phone. I'm like, damn. Okay, so I dealt with that for 3 weeks. There was a police officer that lived in my neighborhood, and he communicated with me and told me what was going on. He was a huge blessing. And so he was telling me, he said, yeah, well, you can't come within so many feet of your house or whatever, yards or whatever. And he said, but come to my house because it's outside of that, So I went to his house, and my son recognized my car. I'm in the house talking to the police officer. I hear my son, I hear this door knock. He said, man, it's your son. Stay up here. Do not come downstairs. Now it had been maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks since I've seen my kids. So I can go down there. I hear him answer the door. My son says, my dad's in there? He said, yeah, son, he's in here. He said, but he can't talk to you right now. And my son goes, Why? Every bit of that was killing me, dude. Every bit of that was killing me. And he said, he said, why? He said, listen to me. Just believe me. It's not your father. He wants to see you. He's just know he wants to see you. You got to work some things out. It's going to be all right. And I just kept hearing my son say, I can't just see him. So anyway, so another week goes by and I get a call from my attorney. Says, so your wife's attorney called and she dropped the case. She dropped the charges. I'm like, oh, she dropped the charges. Cool. He said, yeah, because I talked to the attorney. We're talking. He said, your son, he wants to testify. So basically her attorney doesn't want her to look crazy and this and the other. And he said that she's actually remorseful. So she says she wants to drop the charges. I'm like, great. Well, the county dropped it. The state was like, no, we ain't dropping it. Just refused. We're not dropping it. So I ended up having to go to court, man. And basically what they said was, what came down to was, you can fight this if you want to fight it, kind of up in the air. One thing for sure, though, you can't leave the state until you go to court. Oh, cool. So when's the court date going to be? I don't know. Could be 1 month, could be 3 months, could be 9 months. Well, obviously, you know what I do for a living. You know, I had a Michael Jackson tour coming up. I'm like, I can't be stuck in the state. Well, you can go for a plea bargain. Wait, what's that exactly? You break that down.
Because you were green, you weren't a criminal, you weren't about the system, you didn't know nothing about the system. You were completely ignorant of all of that because you hadn't that wasn't your life.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that exact quote that you said earlier, ignorance is no excuse. I heard that was spoken to me.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse is what the judge says to anyone before they put the gavel on them and look at them.
They said it.
So what ended up happening?
Hey, is your screen saying not responding as well? Or is it just me?
I'm sorry, Rep and Douglas.
My speaker is off. What the hell? It just disappeared.
Okay.
It's not responding. I'm gonna have to go out and come back in.
So Romeo, excuse the interruption, everyone.
Okay.
Romeo, what ended up happening? Did you accept the deal?
I had to. I had no choice, so I had to accept that, and then I got probation for like a year and a half or something. I had to. They knew exactly my situation, so they kind of worked with me so I could go ahead and travel. And then they said, if you don't get in any trouble, then everything is fine. But at this point in the next year, or however long it was, they said, I don't care if you're in a club and a guy comes up and punch you in the face, you better walk out. Like, this is ridiculous, man.
And were you allowed to see your children in that?
I was allowed to see my kids again. After that, I was able to see my kids, and for a while, I had to have someone pick my kids up, meet me at another location so I could see them, spend time, and then take them to my friend, and he would bring them back to the house. Another thing that was devastating was, and I know you experienced this too, the police officers told me, you have 3 or 4 hours to meet us at your home and get all your belongings out.
Yes.
Of my house.
Out of your house that your name is on the deed. We both went through that. Yes. You got 15 minutes to get your most important stuff.
I'm like, bro,
and don't ever go back again.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna escort you there. We're gonna stand there. So my neighbors are sitting there watching the cops around my house, looking at me. I got a couple of friends that I called, and we're trying to pack things. I'm like, dude, this is years of accumulation that I have to get out of my house in 3 or 4 hours. Of course, it was humiliating. And then come to find out at the end of it all, of course, she was coerced into doing that. Later on, we talked about it. I think basically what the story is that I looked too good. She was very honest. My wife she's very honest. So she told him, listen, this is the deal. The kids love him. He's been the primary provider. He works, he does this, I work, but he pretty much takes care of everything, blah, 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 blah. Well, what's the deal? He's leaving the house. He's doing this. So ultimately they were like, that's great. You're making him look like a saint. Mm-hmm. So if at any point he decides he wants to come and get the kids, he's going to look like an awesome guy. So absolutely. You need to go home and try to provoke him to do something.
Absolutely. And therein is where the parental alienation starts, guys. That's what we are talking about. And Douglas, unmute yourself, John, as well.
Yeah, that's exactly how it starts.
We're going to open the floor to discussion because that's the normal status quo. First, to vilify the man, dirty him up, get a jacket on him, meaning a felony or misdemeanor jacket, to make him look bad when we're good fathers. I know the father you've been. I know your kids. You've always been an excellent father. So what they do is they dirty you up. None of us have a criminal record. We're not felons or any of that. So they have to dirty us up to justify the wrong that they're doing and to justify separating us from our home and separating us from our children. And that's the beginning stages of parental alienation. It happened to you, Douglas. It happened to Romeo. It happened to myself. It happened to Rep. Tone, the entire panel. John, did it happen to you?
Did not have that. I had the accusations, but it didn't go as far as court, but I was threatened with it. But I do want to back up a little bit because I do not want to gloss over what he had said.
Okay.
There was no case because she said there's no case here. And the state, instead of saying, you're saying nothing happened, then we're good. They said, no, we're not going to drop it. We're going to get him.
Absolutely.
He has to prove that he is innocent of a case that does not exist.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That is, how insane is that?
Well, let me touch on that, John. The game is to get you to plea bargain. They tried that with me. They tried that with everybody. The difference in me and Romeo is I was like, you take the plea bargain. I said that to the fake defender, public defender, or public pretender, as some people call them. I said, you take the plea bargain and you go do a little time and you go get on probation for something you've never done. Mm-hmm. I'm completely innocent. The difference is Romeo had tours waiting. He couldn't tell these people, I got this money waiting. I can't go get that money and continue to take care of myself and my family.
I was about to
accepted the deal, and they do that to men all across the country.
I was about to say he gave them the aha moment because he's doing something that few people on the planet would even be able to do. So they went, aha!
100%.
Right.
100%.
How we got it. You want to go with Michael? You got to take what we're going to show. You got to eat what we're about to serve you.
100.
So that you can go and do the things that we can only dream about.
Which is honestly, that is really the foundation of why I've been so supportive of Evan's situation since I've known him and since I've watched him. I've known Evan before the situation happened. You know what I'm saying? So I saw, Evan and I used to spend time during the day because we used to work at the same spots. We used to promote the same joints, the same club. I spent days with him when I'm seeing his son doing his multiplications and spelling words and counting and jumping on him and hugging him and kissing him and going on every day because I had my son. We went to the park, you know what I'm saying, right over there in the Encino. Remember, Evan?
Yeah.
I saw it. So when I saw this going down, it of course, it struck a nerve with me. God is good. And in my situation, I ended up a year and a half after the divorce, I ended up getting custody of both of my sons, and I raised them for the rest of. I still raise them now. They're grown, they're men now, but I raised them for the rest of their lives, and it just worked out. And man, I was so grateful. But when I saw Evan, I know as a father who he is. I've seen him firsthand, up close, So
Absolutely. And Romeo, thank you for saying that, because the public will buy into the vilification. They'll buy into the bad story quicker than they accept the good story.
Of course.
One of the things that you said was, and you received your children. This is something I want to put out there so that people are not ignorant of the law. Your children at the age of 13 and 14 can actually make their own decisions. They can petition the court and say, I want to see my father. Okay. Yes. It's not on anybody else. They're old enough to speak for themselves. In my particular case, they were so corrupt, they never allowed my children to come to court and speak for themselves. They covered up everything. In Romeo's situation, his kids came to him. They said, I want to be with my dad. So to everyone out there listening, your children do have a choice. Absolutely. As to where they want to go, where they want to live, and who they want to live with once they reach 13, 14 years of age. John, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was about to say, because you had said that they can see if they can see their father if they want to see him, but they can actually say, I want to live.
Yeah, at the age of 13. Yep.
Yes, but a lot of people don't know that. Right. And in my case, the judge wouldn't even allow my children to come testify. They were so corrupt in that court. And so many people don't believe when I talk about the corruption. And some of them will come, they'll show up. And Romeo is one of those people. And Romeo witnessed them the attorney caught blatantly lying on record, and the sheriff, the deputy in the court lying with the attorney. I exposed both of them on record in open court and tell them if anything happened, Romeo.
No, they act like they overlooked it. They completely overlooked it. The whole courtroom, people there with Evan, and even people that weren't even involved with us were like, what's going on? I have to commend Evan for one. Brother handled himself so well, spoke so eloquently in court, dealing with that emotion, still holding on to how to present his evidence and everything. I gotta commend you on that, bro, because I couldn't have done it. I know I couldn't have done it, bro. I know I couldn't have done it.
I disagree. I think that you could have.
I appreciate it.
I think that
John, you don't know Romeo.
No, listen, we all have that thing in us, but you look at what the balance is, because that's what they expect. Sometimes they look at pigment and that's what they expect. They expect. Yep. See, told you.
Thing is,
see, I told you.
What I know is that I could have overcome, getting loud and screaming and yelling or cursing and anything like that. I get emotional. That's my thing. I get emotional, and I know what I feel like today. When I think about what happened back then, I get emotional. Yes. So when I see this brother who's dealing with it for 7 years, and I saw him stand there and hold himself together and speak in ways that he literally shut these people down. There's no way that they could deny what he was presenting, but they denied what he's presenting. And we were like, you gotta be kidding. We all walked out of the room. Everything that he presented was just so plain. They blatantly, and he would ask them.
They just walk it back and say, "Oh, well, that's a little bit of a mistake. My bad."
It was off record or something. John, that's incorrect. There was no mistakes made. The reason they can do that is because of the preponderance of the evidence, and that's why we have to change that. I was in pro per, as Douglas, and pro per is simply you're representing yourself. Douglas did the same thing. There were no mistakes made. They were blatantly caught. They were embarrassed. But because family court is based on the preponderance of the evidence, those judges can pretty much do whatever they feel. Federal court has to start regulating family court on a local level. It's unregulated. So the judge knew the attorney was blatantly violating their code of ethics. The judge knew it. He even said, well, he's an officer of the court. But the judge, in his authority of the preponderance of the evidence, could say and do whatever it is that he wanted to do. I see we have a question on the panel. Larry, put that question up again so we can see what is being asked, please.
The question is, question is from one of our members on the group. It's from Cadence Bay. She asked, how do men not have rights? Like, in what ways?
It is because family court is unregulated and the judge is doing whatever they feel. And when Romeo was offered that deal, that's a usual game that they use to vilify the man, get a record on him because he's too clean. They tried that with you, Douglas. They tried it with me. Unfortunately, They succeeded with Romeo when he accepted the plea bargain because he had higher stakes because he had tours coming up. Go ahead, John.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was saying that not only is the family court unregulated, often, as we had talked about before the session started, they're not even real judges. They are commissioners that are sitting on the bench in lay of an actual judge.
Mm-hmm. Well, they actually have real judges there as well, John. The commissioners sometimes come in and they are in the courtroom working to become a judge. But in many cases, it's an actual judge that has been appointed and in some cases elected. It is an actual judge. The problem is they stand under the umbrella of we are doing what is in the best interest of the children and the family, and they are not. Their actions show that they're doing what is in the best interest of getting the most money they can. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. Yeah. And as Douglas said, his retainer was exhausted immediately, meaning they're saying we're out of money. And how they do this is emails, Douglas. Your emails are $40 a pop.
Emails. Go ahead. I think they'll also have, their client just come up with tiny little things to just find something to argue about. Because there are so many times where it's like, yo, she's over here scheduling this stuff on my time, this parental alienation. I'm asking for her to just communicate with me like, yo, I know this is your time, but they had this thing, maybe we can work it out. Not once. It's never like that. It's like, this is what you're going to do. This is what they're going to do. I have all the power and you're just going to do it. Ha ha.
Yeah, and phone calls with the attorney cost $40 a pop, sometimes $75. An attorney's hourly wage to sit down and listen to you on the phone call, folks, listen up.
$350.
They're charging you for that, and they make $700 an hour in some cases, $500 an hour in some cases, and some of them charge $300 an hour, and some of them charge $8 and up. My retainers were $10,000 a pop when I hired an attorney, and they walk into the corruption and then run away with my retainer. They literally quit the case. We have another question that's up. Douglas, can you see it and give it to us, please?
This question is from Tassars Clyde. How would a father handle a scenario where a child is fed with a total bias in which he or she views the mother as a better, more caring parent?
Absolutely great question. That's where we're at.
I mean, it's pretty much that's the parental alienation right there, right? Like you'll pick the kids up for your time, and then the story that you're hearing is, well, mom said you're a deadbeat. Well, mom said you didn't do this. Well, mom said you didn't do that, and it's like, mom's not even supposed to be having that conversation with you. That's actually none of your business. Sure. But
that's
I'm not that guy.
That's the beginning stages of parental alienation. And there is a technical definition for parental alienation, and it's also in many cases considered a syndrome. John Rockmore, will you elaborate with sources and such?
Parental alienation is a situation in which one parent uses strategies, sometimes referred as brainwashing, alienating, or programming, all right, to distance the child from the other parent. Now, they do have a term called parental alienation syndrome. This was brought on by Dr. Richard Gardner. It is a real thing. Many of you will understand it when you hear, an alienator might divulge unnecessary, rational details or irrational details about the mother or the father. An alienator may prevent a child from seeing or talking to the other parent. An alienator may insist that the child's personal items, like if they were supposed to come and see you, but they can't bring the wubby, they can't bring the bear, those things have to stay here at the home, knowing that the child will want for those things and want to be close to it. An alienator might plan tempting activities. We talked about this earlier. Tempting activities during your custody time so that you seem like the bad guy. I got to go hang out with daddy when I should be at Disneyland with mom.
Oh, man. And then that's the way they'll spin it. Like, well, you don't care about the kids because you don't want to take them to do their thing. What do you mean? You don't care about the kid's relationship with the other parent?
Yeah.
Like, don't you care about the other parent having a relationship with the kids? Like, that's just as relevant, right?
For sure.
And in that process of parental alienation, it becomes a game. Even Chris Rock talked about it in his comedy special. What was it called?
Tambourine.
Chris Rock said, I compete. I tell them kids they get to tell their mother, I did my homework with Drake. Or Lady Gaga's cooking me breakfast this morning. I can't come see you. Those are parental alienation games with a child that you know the child is going to want to go where the fun is. In my situation, because I was my children's primary caretaker, the fun was with me. It didn't matter what they offered my children. They was like, we want to be with dad, because they were with me all the time anyway. And the court shut that down. The court was like, oh, this guy is too good of a father. Well, we'll fix that. You won't be able to see your kids. And the judge even tried to get passports for my children. And we're winding down on the show, but what I want to talk about in our show next week is jurisdiction, as well as understanding that there's a thing called the Hague Convention. And there are many countries that are signatories of the Hague Convention. But if you have a country that is not a signatory, such as India, where my ex-wife is from, then if she abducts my children and takes them to India, then I don't have any recourse. I can't go.
Wow.
And they go to India and they join forces and extradite my children back, because India is not a signatory. They'll tell America, we cannot get involved, and no, you can't come over here to.
I didn't know they were part of the Hague Convention, man. I had to do the same thing.
And so the judge was trying to get her passports. That's how corrupt this judge. You want passports?
Wow.
I'll give them. So I went over the judge's head and I called the passport bureau, the head of the passport bureau, and told them what was at stake. And I said, I'll hold you liable. I was relentless about that. And Romeo knows it because he was there the entire time. They were trying to abduct my children and take them to India. And the entire judges and court systems were working against me and knew I was their primary caretaker and knew my children loved and adored me. Even the professional monitors that I paid $100 an hour were telling the court and writing reports saying that kids want to be with their father. So these are the things we're going to be discussing in our next show coming up, is jurisdiction, as well as children being abducted. These are all a part of parental alienation. Romeo, what was your first experience when you were taken out of the house? Was that your first experience with being alienated, where you couldn't talk to your kids?
Yeah, as soon as I, like I said, I left as soon as I knew that she had called the cops. But then my attorney told me, once he got the news, is that you have a restraining order. So you can't go to the house. You can't talk to your kids. This was just within hours after that little blow up. And then that went for about 3 weeks. I just couldn't speak to him at all. Couldn't see him, couldn't speak to him, couldn't anything.
And that's the other game, to get a restraining order in place. And these are not even criminal restraining orders. In most cases, they're civil restraining orders put in place by family court. If at first they put a temporary restraining order against Romeo, and then with that temporary restraining order, that's a setup, because if you go to your house, they'll arrest you immediately based on that temporary restraining order. And you haven't even had a hearing for that restraining order to actually be in place. But by law, if there's a temporary restraining order in place, you cannot go anywhere near the property or the children. 150 yards is normally what they set it at.
Exactly.
But guys, we're rounding down in time. I'd like to say this before we go. First of all, thank you, John Rockmore, one of our panelists, Douglas Brown, and Romeo Johnson, our special guest. We'd like to ask if you would come back and join us again if you're available. We know your schedule is busy.
Sure, bro. You know I got you.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a wonderful thing to hear. Guys, we're getting this information out piece by piece. And restraining orders is something that's used as a powerful tool in family court, and judges are giving them out with rubber stamps to anyone in order for the other party, the petitioner, to get the upper hand in divorce, in child custody, and separation of property. That gives a person the upper hand once a restraining order is put in place. As Romeo stated, he couldn't go back to his house. Then he was given a small amount of time to go get his things. I experienced the same thing. So next show, we're going to be talking about restraining orders and the use of that, jurisdiction of the court, and when people are committing crimes by taking children out of the state or out of the country, that's out of the jurisdiction. We'd like to thank you for tuning in to MER, Men Equal Rights. We'll be back next Sunday at 8 p.m. We'll see you there.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Thanks for joining us. If you want any information on parental alienation, put your information in the chat and we will send you some information.
Please like, share, please follow, subscribe. Thanks for watching.